All right, so today we're going to dive into some really fascinating material about digital marketing and how it can be like this core engine,
Yeah.
For startup growth.
Yeah, for sure.
And you brought us this article called "Unleashing the Power of Digital Marketing for Startups: The Untold Journeys of Pioneers."
Yeah.
And it draws on narratives from entrepreneur stories.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that really struck me when I was reading this was just the idea that digital marketing is not,
Yeah.
just like a boost.
Right.
It can actually be the thing that propels a new business forward in a major way.
Absolutely.
So our aim here is to really dissect these untold journeys
Yeah.
that the article talks about,
Yeah.
and pull out like the key strategies,
Right. Yeah.
the practical insights that you can actually use.
Exactly.
We'll be looking at some well-known figures,
Yeah.
and maybe some less obvious tactics
Mm-hmm.
that have really delivered results.
Yeah, I think that's going to be super interesting. One of the things that I think is so fascinating when you start thinking about this topic is how digital marketing has really fundamentally shifted the whole landscape for startups.
Okay.
Unlike traditional approaches to marketing that often require, significant investment up front and can be really difficult to target precisely.
Mm-hmm.
Digital offers this level of agility and measurability that's incredibly valuable, especially when resources are tight, like they typically are with new ventures.
Right. And the article kicks off with this really bold statement. It suggests that digital marketing can catapult a fledgling business into the stratosphere of success.
Okay.
And when I see language like that, I'm always a little skeptical that is this really is this hyperbole, or is there some truth to this?
Right.
And so I think, as we delve into these stories, we start to see how that kind of language might actually be based in reality.
Yeah.
It's not just about slow, steady growth, is it?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I think when you think about the fundamental challenges that a new business faces, like building awareness, reaching potential customers, carving out a space in a really crowded market.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, these were these significant hurdles,
Yeah.
That required substantial capital to overcome.
Yeah.
Digital marketing, when it's done strategically, offers these pathways to overcome those challenges more efficiently and often with a greater degree of precision.
Mm-hmm.
It's really about finding those direct connections with your ideal customer.
And so to bring this to life,
Yeah.
The article shares some really compelling stories.
Yeah.
And let's start with Neil Patel.
Okay.
Who, he's often described as this self-made digital marketing guru.
Right.
And what's so interesting about his journey, I think, is this evolution from college dropout to a digital marketing mogul.
Right.
As the article points out, it really underscores the idea that success in this field can be driven by knowledge and relentless effort, more than maybe traditional qualifications or deep pockets.
Yeah. I think that's a really empowering message.
Yeah. So what were some of Patel's specific early strategies that really exemplify this for you?
Well, I think what stands out, and when you look at Patel's early work, was his deep understanding of content.
Okay.
He really recognized that power of creating valuable, in-depth, blog posts and resources that directly address the questions and needs of his audience.
Mm-hmm.
And this wasn't just about like surface level content.
Right.
This was about providing real, actionable insights that positioned him as a knowledgeable authority in the space.
Okay, so providing genuine value up front.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that focus on long form keyword targeted content, that's a strategy that continues to be incredibly effective for building organic traffic and establishing that thought leadership.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so next, the article highlights Rand Fishkin and his work with Moz.
Mm-hmm.
And it notes how he really kind of revolutionized the SEO landscape.
Yeah.
Help startups, supercharge their online presence.
Right.
Again, we're seeing that word supercharge, this idea of this like rapid acceleration.
Right.
So beyond just optimizing websites, what was the core shift in how people thought about SEO that Fishkin and Moz really championed?
Well, I think, what Fishkin and Moz brought to the forefront was this idea of democratizing SEO knowledge.
Okay.
Early on, SEO felt like this black box, very mysterious.
Right.
But Moz, through their transparent content and their tools and the community they built, really helped to demystify that process.
Okay.
They emphasized, the importance of understanding how search engines actually evaluate websites.
Right.
Things like the quality and relevance of the content, the authority of backlinks, the overall user experience.
Okay.
And this allowed startups to build a really solid digital marketing foundation based on genuine value and user satisfaction, rather than relying on, potentially short-sighted or manipulative tactics.
So it was really about understanding those underlying principles to build something sustainable. Okay.
For sure.
And then we have Sophia Amoruso and Nasty Gal.
Okay.
And her story starting on eBay.
Wow.
And growing into this multi-million-dollar fashion empire through unconventional marketing tactics and social media prowess really speaks to, I think, the power of understanding and connecting with a specific online audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what were some of those unconventional tactics that really stood out to you as being particularly impactful?
Well, I think Amoruso was incredibly savvy in understanding the power of community and visual storytelling.
Even in those early days of social media, she cultivated this very distinct online persona for the Nasty Gal brand.
Okay.
It was edgy, confident, empowering. And she used platforms like MySpace and early Instagram to showcase her products in a way that really resonated with her target demographic.
Okay.
She fostered this sense of exclusivity and aspiration.
Interesting.
It wasn't just about selling clothes. It was about selling a lifestyle and a sense of identity.
Okay.
And she built this really loyal following by authentically engaging with that community.
It's fascinating how that strong brand identity, even in those early digital spaces, could translate to such significant growth.
Absolutely.
All right, and then finally, the article points to Dollar Shave Club.
Okay.
And their, that viral campaign that used humor and simplicity to create a marketing sensation.
Right.
And this is, a classic example, I think, that comes up a lot.
But what is it about that particular campaign that made it so effective? And what can startups learn from that success?
Well, I think, the brilliance of that Dollar Shave Club video was its relatability.
Okay.
And its very direct and humorous approach to this common consumer pain point, overpriced razors. It wasn't trying to be overly slick or aspirational.
Right.
It was just funny. It was honest, and it very clearly communicated that value proposition in a way that was super memorable.
Right.
And I think, for startups, the key takeaway there is the power of authentic storytelling.
Okay.
And not being afraid to inject personality into your marketing. It doesn't always require a massive budget to create something that really resonates and gets shared organically.
Okay. So we've seen these really diverse examples of how individuals and companies have leveraged digital marketing in really impactful ways. Now, the article breaks down 5 key digital marketing strategies that are really essential for startups.
Yeah.
So first up is search engine optimization, or SEO.
Right.
So for someone just starting out, why should SEO be a priority?
Well, I think, you can think of SEO as laying the foundation for long-term sustainable online visibility.
Okay.
When someone searches for a product or service that you offer on Google, for example,
Yeah.
you want your website to appear high in those search results.
Okay.
SEO involves optimizing your website and your content so that search engines can easily understand what you offer and rank you accordingly.
Okay.
And this means that you're attracting organic traffic, people who are actively looking for what you provide, without having to pay for every click,
right?
Which can be absolutely crucial.
Yeah, especially early on.
Especially for startups with limited marketing budgets.
Makes sense. It's about getting found by people who are already interested.
Exactly.
The second key strategy is utilizing social media platforms. We touched on Nasty Gal's success here.
Yeah.
Beyond just having a presence on these platforms.
Right.
What should startups be thinking about in terms of actively engaging?
Well, I think it's really about building communities.
Okay.
and fostering genuine connections. Don't just broadcast your message.
Right.
Actually engage in conversations.
Okay.
Understand which platforms your target audience frequents.
Yeah.
And tailor your content and your engagement strategy to each platform.
Yeah.
Share valuable content, respond to comments and messages, participate in relevant discussions.
Okay.
Social media, when it's used strategically, is a powerful tool for building brand awareness,
right.
Fostering loyalty, and even gathering valuable feedback.
The third strategy is content marketing, which the article very aptly calls, content is king.
Yeah.
We saw Neil Patel's early success with this.
Yeah.
So what are the different forms this king can take for a startup?
Yeah.
And why is creating this valuable and relevant material so critical?
Well, content can encompass a wide range of formats.
Yeah.
Blog posts, videos, infographics, podcasts, ebooks, even webinars.
Right.
I think the underlying principle is to provide value to your audience.
Okay.
Answer their questions, solve their problems, offer insights that are related to your industry.
Okay.
And by consistently creating that high-quality content, you not only attract potential customers, but you also establish your brand as a knowledgeable and trustworthy authority.
Okay.
Which can be a significant differentiator for a startup.
Then we have email marketing. And in an age of so much digital noise, is email still a worthwhile channel for startups to invest in?
Yeah.
It feels a little old-fashioned sometimes.
I know it does, but honestly, despite the rise of newer platforms, email marketing remains a highly effective tool for startups. It allows for direct and personalized communication with your audience.
Right.
You can nurture leads, you can announce new products or services, share valuable updates, and ultimately drive conversions.
Okay.
Building an email list of interested individuals gives you that direct line of communication, and allows you to segment your audience and tailor your messaging for greater impact.
Okay.
It's a powerful tool for building those customer relationships and driving repeat business.
Okay. And then the fifth key strategy is pay-per-click or PPC advertising. This allows startups to pay for targeted ads.
Right.
To appear in search results or on other websites.
Yeah.
How can a startup effectively utilize PPC?
Okay.
Especially when, they might be very conscious of their spending early on.
Well, PPC can be a very effective way to generate that immediate visibility and drive targeted traffic to your website, particularly in those early stages, when your organic reach is still developing.
Okay.
The key is to be strategic with your targeting,
right.
Focusing on specific keywords and demographics that align with your ideal customer.
Yep.
Start with smaller, highly focused campaigns, closely monitor your results, and continuously optimize your bids and your ad copy to maximize your ROI.
Okay, so it's really about getting that right message in front of the right people at the right time.
Exactly.
And PPC gives you that level of control.
It does. It does.
All right, so those are the 5 core strategies, but the article also touches on a couple of more unconventional digital marketing tips.
Okay.
For startups that are looking to maybe stand out from the crowd a little bit.
Right.
One of these is gamification.
Okay.
So how can incorporating game-like elements actually help a startup achieve its marketing goals? It sounds a bit, playful at first glance.
Well, and I think that playfulness is precisely where the power of gamification lies.
Okay.
By incorporating elements, like points, badges, leaderboards, challenges into your marketing campaigns or even into your product itself, you can significantly increase user engagement. It taps into our intrinsic motivations as humans.
Right.
Our desire for achievement, for competition, for rewards.
Yeah.
This can lead to users spending more time interacting with your brand, being more likely to share your content, and even becoming, more loyal customers.
Okay.
Think about, apps that reward you for consistent use.
Yeah.
That's gamification in action.
Right. It's about making the experience more engaging, more sticky.
For sure.
The other unconventional tip that the article mentions is collaborating with micro-influencers. And, we often hear about these celebrity endorsements.
Right.
Which are usually way out of reach for startups. So what's the value proposition of working with these influencers who have a smaller, more niche audience?
Well, micro-influencers typically have a smaller but highly engaged and often very targeted audience, within a specific niche. And their followers often perceive them as more authentic and trustworthy compared to larger celebrities.
Right.
So for startups that are targeting, a specific demographic or interest group, partnering with a relevant micro-influencer can be a really cost-effective way to reach that audience with a credible voice. It's about tapping into existing communities and leveraging that trust that those influencers have already built.
This has all been incredibly helpful, in breaking down not just what these pioneers did, but really digging into like the how and the why behind their success and the fundamental strategies at play.
Absolutely.
And the article concludes, by reminding us that digital marketing isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. It really needs to be tailored.
Absolutely. What propels one startup forward might not be the right path for another. It comes down to a deep understanding of your unique brand, your target audience, and that ever-evolving digital landscape. The willingness to experiment, analyze what's working and what's not, and to adapt your strategy based on those learnings is absolutely critical for any startup looking to thrive in the digital age.
So to recap, we've taken this really insightful journey through why digital marketing is such a critical lever for startup success. We've examined those inspiring stories of individuals and companies who've used it to achieve, really remarkable growth. And we've broken down, both those foundational strategies and some of the more innovative strategies that new businesses can consider implementing.
And hopefully, as you followed these examples and our discussion, it sparked some ideas about how these principles could be relevant to your own endeavors. Whether you're directly involved in a startup or just curious about the dynamics of modern business growth. Understanding that power and potential of digital marketing in today's world is invaluable.
Definitely. And considering that wide range of approaches that we've explored, it really makes you think, like, in today's constantly shifting digital environment, what seemingly unconventional digital marketing tactic, something that might be just on the horizon or even something we haven't fully grasped the potential of yet, might hold the key to creating truly breakthrough impact for startups?
That's a great question.
It's a fascinating question to ponder.
Yeah.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
My pleasure.
All right, that's it for today's Deep Dive.